Dear friends, recently we just read an article on the Chinese site Yinhe with the title, 5 times suppression, 5 times patience. The 30 years of confrontation between China and the US have been 30 years of humiliation and a heavy burden for us. The content of the article is as follows: since the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the game between China and the United States can be roughly divided into two stages. First, from 1991 to 2010, when the United States tested China. Second, after 2010, the United States formally suppressed and contained China. In the first stage, although China has succeeded the Soviet Union in carrying the banner of socialism and has become the United States' biggest strategic rival, the United States believes after many trials that China's determination and strength to confront the United States are still limited. Therefore, at this stage, the United States' strategic focus is mainly on the Middle East oil region, not on the Asia-Pacific, but in the second stage, after China's GDP surpassed Japan's and became the world's second-largest economy, the United States panicked. Because the economy used to be China's biggest shortcoming, if this shortcoming comes up, it will become a high probability that China will catch up with the United States in technology, military and other fields. Based on this, the United States turned its focus from the Middle East and returned to the Asia-Pacific, entering a stage of formal and comprehensive suppression of China. In these two stages of competition, 5 presidents of the United States successively wielded the big stick and carried out extreme suppression on China 5 times. However, in view of the huge gap in strength between China and the United States, China has adopted a strategy of strategic tolerance and endured humiliation and heavy burdens in exchange for a peaceful and stable development environment for more than 30 years. It can be said that without these experiences of enduring humiliation and hardship, China would not be as strong as it is today. Without a strong China, there would not be today's desperate counterattack. The first time, the Yinhe incident caused by the United States made China humiliated. On July 23, 1993, the United States accused China's Yinhe cargo ship of secretly transporting raw materials for manufacturing chemical weapons to Iran based on the intelligence it obtained, and threatened to impose sanctions on China. At the same time, the United States also sent 2 warships and 5 helicopters to the international waters where the ship was located, in an attempt to forcibly board the ship and search it. Subsequently, China immediately launched an investigation and confirmed that the U.S. accusations were false. However, the United States does not believe China's investigation. Instead, it insists that the intelligence is absolutely accurate and insists on inspecting the Yinhe. This is something unprecedented since the founding of the People's Republic of China. When the Chinese people heard about this, they were all extremely angry. What to do? Xia Zhukang, the Chinese diplomat who led the negotiations with the United States, later disclosed the matter and said that China had no choice under the circumstances. If it refuses, the United States will say, there must be some on the ship. And it won't be able to clean itself up even if it jumps into the Yellow River. But accepting it is very cowardly. As a result, after more than a month of negotiations, by the end of August, China reluctantly agreed to the United States sending experts as Saudi technical advisors to inspect the Galaxy, parked in Davenport. As a result, the Americans found nothing. Representatives from the 3 parties then signed the inspection report, confirming that the ship contained no banned chemicals. Although the United States later withdrew the accusation, this incident still made many Chinese people feel that it was a humiliation. Later, Xia Zhukang also said that agreeing to the U.S. boarding inspection could easily be misunderstood, and it was not easy to make this decision. The reason why it is not easy is that China is not as powerful as the United States and cannot compete head-on with the United States. But that's not all, because there are bigger considerations behind China's forbearance. At that time, China had entered the deep water zone of reform and opening up and urgently needed to integrate into the world's economic circle and join the WTO, and this matter still needs the support of the United States. On the other hand, the Soviet Union has just collapsed. If China's counterattack against the United States is too drastic, it is likely to cause the United States to return to the Asia-Pacific from the Middle East in advance to deal with China. If so, China's reform and opening up process will likely be disrupted by the United States. A small leak will sink a great ship. Looking back now, China's forbearance back then was indeed very necessary. The second time, creating a crisis in the Taiwan Strait, the United States attempted to sting China's nerves. After the Yinhe incident, the United States was still worried about China, so the Taiwan Strait crisis came 2 years later. This was essentially an extreme test of China by the United States, the trigger that led to the Taiwan Strait crisis in 1995 to 1996 was that the United States allowed Taiwan independence activist Lee Teng-hui to visit the United States. So why did the United States break the rules and allow Lee Teng-hui to visit the United States? This is about the United States' conspiracy to use Taiwan to contain China. Although the pursuit of using Taiwan to contain China has always been the established policy of the United States, China and the United States reached a consensus on the Taiwan issue before and after the negotiations on the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the United States in the 1970s and 1980s. That is to say, the United States recognizes the One China principle and does not step on Taiwan's red line. However, since the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the West has begun to advocate the view that China will replace the Soviet Union as the opponent of the United States, and therefore advocates containing China as soon as possible. At that time, a researcher from a British think tank also clearly proposed that Taiwan should be used to contain China. He also said that human rights issues and most favored nation status issues could not effectively contain China. Only the Taiwan issue pricks China's nerves the most. Driven by anti-China forces in the West, then U.S. President Clinton came up with the dangerous idea of testing China's bottom line on the Taiwan issue. Can China stand up to the temptation of the United States? Of course not, because the Taiwan issue is China's core issue. The United States broke its promise and supported Lee Teng-hui, who pursued the One China, One Taiwan policy. This is far worse in nature than the Yinhe incident. China has no reason and cannot give in, therefore, China has adopted a series of countermeasures. As well as military exercises that are becoming larger and larger each time. On March 8, 1996, 3 missiles launched by the People's Liberation Army directly hit a target 47 miles west of Kaohsiung, Taiwan. Faced with the PLA's firepower, the United States openly dispatched nearly 40 warships to the Taiwan Strait, demonstrating a posture of, the United States wants to fight for Taiwan. The U.S. military intervention in the Taiwan Strait is undoubtedly a second insult to China. In desperation, China's top leaders at that time determined 2 criteria for using force, intervention or invasion by the U.S. military, and Taiwan's declaration of independence. However, neither of these situations happened later. With China, the United States, and Taiwan all interested in cooling down the crisis was eased. Since then, Taiwan's current leaders have never set foot on U.S. soil, and the United States has given up its illusion of trampling on the One China principle. The third time, bombing of Chinese embassies abroad, the U.S. strategic suppression of China escalates. After the Taiwan Strait crisis, leaders of China and the United States exchanged visits. And relations between the two countries have also been eased. But the good times did not last long. In 1999, Clinton once again caused a vicious incident that was extremely harmful and insulting to China. On May 8 of that year, US-led NATO military aircraft bombed the Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia with missiles, resulting in the tragedy of killing 3 Chinese journalists and injuring more than 20 embassy staff. The U.S. bombing of Chinese embassies abroad was tantamount to aggression, and demonstrations against the United States broke out in many places in China. After the incident, China demanded that the United States publicly apologize, severely punish the perpetrators, and compensate for related property losses. This request is not excessive at all, but the United States has resisted. At first, the United States only expressed its deep condolences and regret for the casualties and property losses caused to China. Of course, China would not agree. So when Clinton made a request to have a phone call with Chinese leaders, China directly refused. Later, Clinton met with Li Zhaoxing, the Chinese ambassador to the United States, and only after leaving a message of apology in the condolence book he brought with him, did China agree to Clinton's request for a phone call. Later, the tense situation gradually eased. But the matter did not end there, because the investigation report handed over to China by the United States more than a month later still lacked sincerity and continued to use the theory of accidental bombing. After many rounds of negotiations, the United States only dealt with 8 intelligence personnel, but still only admitted that it used inappropriate targeting methods. Then, after nearly a year of negotiations, the U.S. government paid $28 million in compensation to China. The Chinese people are all outraged by the U.S. bombing of the embassy and its perfunctory handling of the incident. Is it possible that this scar can be erased by the United States just dealing with a few people and paying some money? But China still tolerated it for the sake of the overall situation. China's top priority is to quickly join the WTO, vigorously develop its economy, science and technology, and military, and make the country rich and strong. Only in this way can we truly change the situation of being passively beaten. The 4th time, the plane collided in the South China Sea and China received a SAP at its doorstep. On April Fool's Day, April 1, 2001, a U.S. Navy EP-3 reconnaissance aircraft was illegally conducting reconnaissance in China's exclusive economic zone 110 kilometers southeast of Hainan Island, China. 8-2 fighter jet, causing the Chinese fighter jet to crash in the South China Sea. And the 33-year-old pilot Wang Wei died heroically. After the arrogant and domineering U.S. plane committed the crime, it entered Chinese airspace without China's permission, landed at a military airport in Hainan, and was subsequently placed by us. Not only was the United States unapologetic about this matter, but it also sent 3 destroyers into the waters of the South China Sea the next day to show off its power near Hainan Island on the grounds of monitoring the development of the situation. At that time, the instructions given by Chinese senior officials to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were, "You apologize and I will release him," but it is very difficult for the United States to sincerely apologize. The United States has a very tough attitude and even refused to conduct interviews with the Chinese embassy staff in the United States. The two sides can only communicate by fax. After many communications in this way, the United States agreed to apologize to Wang Wei's family. Comrades in arms, and the Chinese people, apologized for landing a U.S. plane at a Chinese airport without permission. And even this letter of apology has been revised several times by the United States. After the U.S. apology letter met the standards, for U.S. aircraft personnel were allowed to return. But after they returned to China, they received a high-profile interview from George W. Bush, which simply rubbed salt on China's scars. The above 4 humiliating incidents were all tentative attempts by the United States to suppress China. The reason why the United States dares to approach step by step and becomes more arrogant each time is simply because it believes that China is not strong enough and does not dare to confront the United States head-on. From this, the Chinese people finally understood that to maintain the dignity of the country, they must rely on a strong national defense. As a result, a large number of large-scale defense projects that had been shelved or delayed have been launched. Since then, the Chinese Navy has entered the era of dumplings. 5th time, the United States plays the Taiwan card again, and China no longer has to endure it. Since 2010, the United States-China policy has begun to undergo fundamental changes, because China surpassed Japan and became the world's second-largest economy, becoming a real economic and manufacturing power. With a strong economy as its backing, China can accelerate the development of science and technology and national defense and enhance its national hard power. Therefore, the United States quickly withdrew from the Middle East and turned to the Asia-Pacific in an attempt to concentrate its firepower on containing China's development. Especially after Trump, the strategic intention of the United States to suppress China has become more and more obvious. It has launched a trade war, a technology war, and a public opinion war against China. The United States will use any means to deal with China, but when the United States suppression tactics were defeated by China, the United States once again thought of Taiwan. In fact, before the United States played the Taiwan card, it also wanted to use the South China Sea issue and the Diaoyu Islands issue to contain China. However, the relevant countries did not want to become cannon fodder for the United States to suppress China, so the United States had to take action in person. In order to support and utilize the Taiwan Independence Forces, the United States not only defends them internationally and encourages other countries to openly help defend Taiwan, but also frequently sends warships across the Taiwan Strait, showing a strong posture of fighting for Taiwan. Not only that, Tsai Ing-wen recently disclosed for the first time the information that the U.S. military is stationed in Taiwan for training purposes. According to reports, the number of active U.S. military personnel in Taiwan was only 7 in 2016, but now it has increased to about 30. Although the number is not large, the provocative meaning is great. As we all know, one of the prerequisites for the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the United States was that the United States recognize the One China principle and withdraw all U.S. troops stationed in Taiwan. Now, the United States has not only broken its promise, but is also increasing military personnel stationed in Taiwan. This is clearly challenging the mainland's bottom line. China will not tolerate this any longer. After all, China had already made its confession to the United States at the Alaska talks in March this year. China will no longer allow the United States to humiliate China arbitrarily. China now has the strength and determination to counterattack the anti-China behavior of all anti-China forces. Therefore, regarding the Taiwan issue, no matter how the United States acts in the future, China will only move forward and never retreat. Based on this judgment, this Taiwan Strait crisis will be different from previous Taiwan Strait crises and will have the following characteristics: the crisis lasts longer. From the time Trump created the Taiwan Strait crisis to the time Biden took over, the Taiwan Strait crisis has not yet shown a cooling trend. In other words, the contest between the two sides in the Taiwan Strait will continue, and the situation in the Taiwan Strait is likely to fall into a protracted confrontation in the future. After all, China and the United States are both nuclear powers, and neither can defeat the other. Neither side will advance easily, nor will they retreat easily. As the confrontation between the two sides continues to intensify, it cannot be ruled out that military frictions or even local conflicts similar to the plane collision in the South China Sea will occur in the Taiwan Strait in the future. Of course, if this situation occurs, it will be impossible for the U.S. military to retreat unscathed. Because China's military equipment has been modernized, it will never happen again for the United States to easily crash a Chinese fighter jet and survive unharmed. China is increasingly determined to completely resolve the Taiwan issue. The Taiwan Independence Forces playing with fire and the arrogance of the United States will only infinitely stimulate the mainland and further strengthen its determination to completely realize cross-strait reunification. It can be said that the more provocative and suppressive the United States is to China, the stronger China's willingness to resolve the Taiwan issue will be. Therefore, the competition between China and the United States in the Taiwan Strait will become increasingly fierce. To sum up, has the Taiwan issue been resolved? When will it be resolved? It has become the key to determining the outcome of the dispute between China and the United States. If the Taiwan issue is not completely resolved, the U.S. strategy to contain China will not end, and China will fall into a protracted war to counter U.S. suppression. This is why China must resolutely speed up and completely resolve the Taiwan issue. Just now is the full text of the article that China wrote. What do you think about this issue? Please leave us a comment below the video. Thank you for watching the entire video. If you like it, remember to click like button and subscribe to the channel so we can meet again in the next show. Goodbye.